name is Jesse Rettle. I'm a licensed and certified orthotist prosthetist. You're here today at New Life Brace and Limb in our San Antonio location. So we'd like to have you into the facility and show you around a little bit on a day in the life as an orthotist prosthetist. You come into our facility, the first thing is our waiting room, and this is where Miss Nancy would greet you and get you the paperwork that we're needing for your insurance to make sure that we can provide you with the best device and outcomes. Here's our kind of open gym PT area, and this is a good place for you to, after you're fit with your device, to practice it and try it out before you go outside and into the real world. So we have some stairs and some different terrain, a big area, enough room for some running. We can put out some obstacles and some ladder drills to help with agility with the different orthotic and prosthetic devices. We have several patient rooms back here that you'll be in. If you need assistance with standing for either evaluating your device or after you've been fit, we have parallel bars in these different rooms. And the rooms are outfitted to accommodate patients for standing and for walking. And a lot of our appointments are a lot of trial and error. So fitting the device, wearing it, getting some feedback on if it's comfortable, if it's accomplishing what it needs to do by either reducing the pain or helping with a weakness to help you walk better, be more safe, and reduce falls. And so a lot of the practice happens here in these rooms, the fittings. We have some fitting rooms here for some casting appointments. So we're back in our gait room again, and this is a lower set of parallel bars that are adjustable for pediatric patients. And what these parallel bars are used for is to help patients with some stability by increasing their base of support by their hands, and gives them kind of the confidence starting off in a new device. If they've chronically had pain or weakness, this helps train them, and we help watch them walk. We do a lot of observational gait, giving them cues on what we're seeing to try and mimic normal human locomotion, try to return somebody back to walking as efficient and safe as possible. We have a mirror at the end of each parallel bar, so the user has biofeedback. They're able to see themselves walking, and they can self-correct based on the feedback that they see when they're walking. Plenty of room here, room for wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, big bariatric size tables that are different heights, patients, tall, short, young, and old. And now we're coming into the laboratory area, and this is where all the assembly and fabrication happens, which is separate than the patient treatment area, which is up front. This is kind of behind the doors, behind the scenes. One of our technicians is Alston Drager. He's going to be walking us through today on each phase of the fabrication process and the different steps. But this room here is the general assembly room where a lot of the manufacturing and assembly come together for the final device. Right behind us here in this room is a casting room, and this is where we take the impressions that have been taken, the molds, and they're filled with plaster of Paris so that we can rectify the molds and get them prepared for making the actual device for the patient. And so we can take impressions of lower extremities for braces like AFOs. That'll be the bulk of what we demonstrate as fabrication today, but also for prostheses, which are replacing anything that's missing externally, prosthetic limbs. They all go through the same type of process. So after we finish with the cast pouring and the model rectification to get the positive mold where we want it, then that mold transitions over to our plastic room, where we'll heat up sheets of plastic in an oven. We do vacuum forming. We also do laminations for the ultra lightweight carbon fiber type sockets that are very strong and very lightweight. And a lot of the fabrication happens in here, whether it's laminations or thermal forming of plastics or foams for foot orthotics. After the plastics are pulled and vacuum formed and cooled down, then they have to be cut off the casts, and they have to be sanded and shaped correctly so that they can fit into shoes or have trim lines that are appropriate for bending and flexing, extending the knee. And that happens in this room here, where we have a lot of sanding equipment and machines. And so we keep these rooms separate to kind of for dust containment, for chemicals, for fumes, and it just kind of helps maintain the organization. After the devices have been sanded and buffed, they come out here for final assembly where pads are glued in, straps are fastened. The prosthetic socket is attached to the prosthetic knee joint or the prosthetic foot for the final check before the patient's scheduled for the delivery of the device. My name is Jesse Rettle, and we're here today at New Life Brace and Limb, located in Stone Oak in Sonterra, Blvd. We have our practice here where we have a patient treatment facility and on-site fabrication for orthotics and prosthetics. As an orthotist prosthetist, my job is to evaluate each patient that comes in to determine if there is a device that would help them either return back to a specific activity, either in sports or to work, or to help reduce pain or provide support for a weak part of the body to reduce falls. Just basically help somebody be more safe. It's part of the rehab process. We work hand in hand with physical therapy. A lot of times after an injury or after a surgery, part of the rehab process is attaining some type of a device that would help return somebody back to functional ambulation or to work. And an orthotic device basically braces a part of the body that's existing. So if you can think about foot drop when you have a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, you need a brace, and that's what an orthotic is basically a brace, and there's all different kinds for many different reasons. So as an orthotist, we evaluate each patient and their condition after we receive a prescription from a physician that gives us permission to treat and evaluate the patient. And then we work with that patient during the initial evaluation to determine what the best device, what type of material would work best for them, what their home environment is, what their job includes, and basically try to get a really good idea for each patient, because there's several different options for devices and materials to give them the best outcome. And including each patient in the outcomes, because at the end of the day, they're here because they want some help, and we're here to help them, but we need to know what it is that they need help with. And a lot of times, some patients may not know. If they've been living in pain for a long time, they may not know that walking without pain is possible. So we try to set realistic expectations with each patient, present several options for treatment, discuss what their insurance covers, what are other funding options, and then basically formulate a plan with the patient so that we know where we would like to get them. And then sometimes it's a long process. So with an orthotist and even a prosthetist, it's not where you come in and receive a trinket, a device, and then you're gone. It's not like a medical device sales type of place. You develop a relationship with your orthotist where you start with the evaluation, set expectations, then you deliver that outcome, and then you have continued follow-up care, because people's condition change. Their limbs change, their situation change, and so these devices can be adapted and modified, and that's where an orthotist really specializes, is in determining that a device is reaching the goal and it gets that patient to accomplish the things that they're needing to accomplish, keep them safe, and it's a continuum of care, making sure that they can continue using the device, that it's working for them and not causing any problems, and we can feed back to the physician and let them know if something else needs to be done. In prosthetics, which is essentially the same as orthotics, except prosthetics, you replace a part of the body that's missing. And I have several examples here today, and we could basically go through the same process where we evaluate a patient and determine what's most important for them. Obviously getting up and being able to walk again if it's a lower extremity amputation. And that's what the examples I have today that we'll discuss. So the first appointment, we evaluate the patient, see what's most important for them, determine what the best device would be for them, show them some samples, let them know kind of what they're getting into, set some realistic expectations, and then start carrying out that treatment plan, which would include measuring of the residual limb, the amputated limb, what's left after it's well healed, and then creating what we call these diagnostic interfaces or check sockets. And so the limb would go inside of this socket, and we can check to see that the socket's fitting correctly because we can visually see through that. And so areas of high pressure would blanch with white over the end of the limb, or areas of gapping or lack of contact, we would be able to determine that the socket needs to be changed or modified. We can actually have the patient bear full weight into the device, while they're here in the office during this diagnostic phase to make sure that the device can distribute pressure over a large area, not cause any painful areas on the limb, and that when they pick up and swing through that it stays on. It's called suspension. So those are the two critical parts of a prosthesis, are suspension, staying on, and distributing weight over a large area to protect the limb for a single limb stance phase. After the diagnostic interface is fitting perfectly, it may take several of these, typically one or two of these diagnostic interfaces that can be changed. Then we're ready to transition this temporary plastic socket that's thick and heavy and not very strong to a more definitive type of socket, which is what you're used to seeing, is a laminated socket. This one has a fabric on the outside. The patient wanted to put their personality into the socket, so we definitely provide that at no extra cost, just to have somebody have more ownership, make it look less medicinal, more of a part of their body, and show off some style. But this socket is a carbon fiber socket, which is very thin, very strong, very durable, and it has a flexible interface to kind of move with the leg and the body as it goes through range of motion. And attached to the prosthetic socket, which is what we make as prosthetists here in the office and do most of the time fitting and evaluating, because this is the most important part, the fit of the socket on the limb, to make sure you don't have skin breakdown, no painful areas, and it stays on, so good suspension. Then we attach these pre-made prosthetic components. And so these are endoskeletal, meaning the strength is on the inside of the prosthesis, and these adjustable components so that we can change the alignment as a patient gets more experienced walking. Their gait may change, and we'll have them back for some adjustments, or we call them tune-ups. This prosthetic foot is a foot that's custom made for each patient based on their height, weight, and activity, that we order from a specialized company that makes the feet that we attach to the prosthetic sockets. And all the prosthetic feet are sized to fit your shoes that you have existing to match your other foot, and the height of the device will make sure it fits in the space that's available, so that we have an equal leg length on both sides. And at this phase, when we attach all these components, we use observational gait. I basically specialize in watching people walk and trying to mimic what we call normal human locomotion. So normal human locomotion has been studied with gait cameras and software, and is determined to be very efficient. So the human body has a very efficient gait. It doesn't use much energy, and it is very safe, and it accomplishes, running, walking, getting from point A to point B. And so when there's a deficiency in that, either with an amputation or a weakness or a deformity or pain, then we assess the patient while they're walking here in our office to try and get them back to normal human locomotion as close as possible. So in a prosthesis, another part of the prosthesis is a liner, and the gel liner is made of a really soft silicone material, and is reflected and rolled onto the residual limb, and this liner goes onto the skin first. And so this liner protects the skin of the leg, and has a pin locking mechanism on this style used for suspension. And the suspension for this socket has a little push button release, and inside of the socket is a female receptacle, and the prosthesis locks into place, which holds it on. This is called pin locking suspension. And this is very popular for beginning prosthesis when the limb is going through a lot of changes, because this can be adjusted to a high level. This suspension system of pin lock can be transitioned later after the limb has healed in approximately 3 to 6 months, and the volume has stabilized and reduced, into a different suspension mechanism called suction. Basically, it uses an air valve, and that removes air from the system, and the prosthesis stays on a little bit more secure, feels a little bit more like your limb, your body. You have better proprioceptive feedback, you can feel the ground. But only if the patient can tolerate the suction, and that's part of our evaluation process as a prosthetist, to make sure that that's something that's appropriate for them. So I decided to become a prosthetist orthotist many years ago, probably 20 years ago now. I have about 24 years of experience. And I lucked out. I ended up falling into this job working as a technician in the back of the lab, fabricating the devices. I was family friends with an owner of an orthotic prosthetic facility, and I started working while I was in high school in the summers, just working in the lab, cleaning up, the dust and the plaster, pouring casts, and learning the material science aspect of that through an apprenticeship and hands-on training, just learning how to thermoform plastics, laminate with resins and carbon fibers, starting to understand, the anatomy and the terminology that were used for these different materials and components and what they do for gait and for what we do for Orthotist Prosthetist. And the day that I decided to turn this into a career for myself, I was asked to come into the patient room and help fit a pair of prosthetic, sockets that I had fabricated as a technician onto a young boy that was congenital. He was born without limbs. And so I helped kind of put these prosthetic limbs on this little boy. And the first time I've ever seen the actual patient part of this, and he was able to stand and walk around the room and then start jogging up and down the hallways, and his whole family started crying, and I thought, wow, by what I was doing in the back, I helped change this patient's life almost instantly. And that gave me such a sense of rewarding feedback to help somebody's life get changed and get them back to do what they were doing. I decided to find out what I needed to do to turn it into a career. So I went to school, and I went to Northwestern in Chicago, and it had a certificate program at the time. Now education for an orthotist prosthetist is a master's level degree. There's several locations throughout the United States that have orthotic and prosthetic education programs with a master's degree, and there's specific courses that are required to get into their program. You can look them up. There's several universities that offer the degree plan. And then after the master's degree, you have a 1-year residency that you'll do clinical rotations in different facilities, like here at New Life Brace and Limb. After you've completed your 1-year residency, you're eligible to sit for your boards. So there are board exams that you take for intro-level orthotics and prosthetics. And then after that, you're ready to practice as an orthotist prosthetist and see your own patients and open your own facility. And within orthotics and prosthetics, you can subspecialize and do only prosthetics, or only orthotics, or only like cranial helmets for little babies. You could specialize in microprocessor controlled technology, like the different knees or the feet for prosthetics, or for the arms and the robotic hands. There's so many different niches that you can specialize in based on your population, where you're living, and your referral sources. I prefer to practice all of it. I enjoy all the challenges day to day that every patient brings to me, and all the options that we have for fabricating orthotics and prosthetics. So introductory salary as an orthotist prosthetist can be between $70,000 and $80,000 a year, but it's commensurate with experience. So on my path, I was in the profession first. I was fabricating. I became a certified technician to fabricate, and then I went through the clinical path of becoming a clinical provider for orthotic and prosthetic care. So my base salary was a little higher when I started, about $90,000. It's definitely 100% employment. You're going to get employed no matter which city you're in. There's a large market. There's a lot of patients that have chronic disease with diabetes and stroke and traumatic brain injury. A lot of children with cerebral palsy and spina bifida that all need help. And so basically right out of school with basic education, master's level education, and 1-year residency, starting salaries around $70,000 to $80,000 a year. And then after you've been in the profession for several years and you become very efficient, salary ranges can go upwards of $140,000 a year at the max. Some of the struggles that we deal with as orthotists and prosthetists is trying to make everybody happy. And so we have a lot of people that come into our office, and they'll have not only a functional problem, but there's a lot of emotional stress that's tied with that. And so there's a lot of psychosocial aspects that our orthotist and prosthetist has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's maybe not being able to completely resolve all the pain from each patient, or meet 100% of their expectations, and or try and help resolve some psychosocial issues, which may take some time after they've regained some function. Some other frustrating factors are not having enough time in the day to see every patient that wants to come into our office. And so frequently we'll come in early, work through lunch, and stay late, not because we have to, but because we want to, because there's so many people out there that we want to help, and there's just a big need for all the populations that need some help. So as an orthotist prosthetist, if that's something that you're interested in doing, what I recommend is shadowing or doing an internship at an orthotic and prosthetic provider like New Life Brace and Limb. It would be good to get in, and if you like to see patients and you like that interaction and that communication, but you also like to work with biomechanics and mechanical devices and hand skills and work with tools and material science, this is a good marriage of art and science into one profession. I recommend shadowing an orthotist prosthetist for a day, seeing what a day is like for them, seeing patients, evaluating them in the room, working with troubleshooting problems for that patient, working in the back of the lab, working with your hands, and understanding the documentation, the paperwork process, working with insurance companies to really understand all facets of that before you get into the profession of orthotics and prosthetics and start applying to one of the master's programs. So being an orthotist prosthetist is very rewarding. We're basically the good guys at the end of the road for somebody after they've been through a traumatic incident or injury, they've been through surgery, and now we're here to help them get up and be more functional. So, patients typically realize that, and so, being an orthotist prosthetist, you have a lot of good days. If you can put all the paperwork and the insurance regulations to the side, it's all about helping patients at the end of the day, and most people enjoy helping people, and in orthotics and prosthetics, that becomes your career. And understanding material science and building different devices and working with patients and helping them improve and accomplish the things that they want to do gives you a high level of satisfaction with your job. And everything is always different. Every patient's unique. Every device that we create and fabricate is unique to that person, so it's always challenging every day, and it never gets boring. Thanks for hanging out with us today, seeing what an average day in the life of an orthotist prosthetist is. You had a chance to see some fabrication. We talked about some of the devices that we fit and fabricate. Thank you, Dr. Webb, for the opportunity to talk about orthotics and prosthetics. If you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to see any additional information, please leave those in the comments below. Like us, subscribe, and we hope to see you soon here at New Life Brace and Limb, 300 East Sonterra Boulevard, San Antonio, Texas, 830-254-4400. Thank you.